Welcome back to the Universe of God. We are continuing on in our investigation into sprites and how they're related to spirit. And this is video 5 of this series, Angels of Light. And so I just want to pick up right back where we left off in the last video as we were making the connection to plasma and how it's the fourth state of matter, and that also angels are considered to hold up the four corners of the earth, the north, south, the east, and west. And when we take that information to the heavens, this angelic order that holds up the four corners of the earth, we see that in the four corner stars. So we don't just have these four corners of the earth, we have these four corner stars that not only reflect each other, but point to one another. And that is Fomalhaut in the Aquarius sign of the zodiac. We have Fomalhaut, we have Regulus, we have, oh my goodness, how did I forget this? The last two, one is in Scorpio constellation, Antares. And that's the red star in the Scorpio constellation. That's one of our corner, our stars, our four corner stars in the zodiac. And the other one is in Taurus the bull. And I'm having trouble remembering that one, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. But anyhow, moving on, we were relating again this scientific information about plasma to the supernatural or the spiritual information regarding angels. So I can't, say this enough right now, but we see here again how the science and the spirit are related, how you could say the sprite and the spirit are really synonymous terms. And this is an example of that. Okay. So moving on as we observe sprites through the scientific community as well. There are bolts that are called super bolts, and these come from sprites. These bolts are called super bolts. They're said to be high altitude sparks that originate on Earth. So they start on Earth first, these sparks of fire. These high altitude sparks start on the ground level, okay? And this is an interesting fact because there's a documentary by Nova, and it describes some of this information that I'm sharing with you about sprites. And so this fact shared by the documentary is interesting because biblically speaking, when Satan fell, he was described as falling to the earth like lightning. So the Bible says that, Jesus saw Satan fall like lightning to the earth, to the ground, to the earth. And this, here's an example of, a description of what's happening with lightning, sprites, so to speak, because they're related. What's happening with lightning physically and what's happening in the supernatural world, how lightning is related to the angelic. Now, the documentary corroborates that sprites are a type of lightning that start on Earth. Wow. And at a very high altitude. So, here's an example that sprites are really a type of lightning, and they start on the Earth as well. So Earth is electrified with energy. It's electrified with energy. But what's awesome and what we have come to know even in the electric universe theory or model that's out there today is that our Earth is made up of electricity and plasma. Okay? So, this is, again, it's all very relative, and it really takes us into more understanding of what's being described as well. So cosmic rays, asteroids, solar winds all reach across the universe, okay, wreaking havoc on planets. However, due to Earth's first line of defense, the atmosphere, okay, we receive protection from pole to pole, from north to south, top to bottom. We receive protection from these things. So we see, you know, various phenomena or various environmental things, even cosmic things that have to interact with our atmosphere in order to interact with us, right? In order to be observed by us. In these, you know, different ways, which is where we get, you know, concepts like sprites and elves and sprite halos and gnomes and all these things that, again, are being repackaged by the scientific community to us. Lightning hammers across the earth. This is described in the Nova documentary about sprites, but it says that lightning hammers across the earth, and it reminds, you know, me of the myth about Thor, who hammers lightning bolts as his superpower. Thor is a depiction of a demigod. Other cultures might describe Thor as a fallen god. Now, these fallen gods or lower gods, and some say they were a part of the original Elohim, are historically or religiously associated with fallen angels. You know, could the ancient stories of myths have been revealing the evidence of science to us in this story form, in this fantasy form, that we, you know, get to look back and learn about? Could the angelic beings of light also be understood through scientific terms, but be corporeal as well? I would have to say very much so. You know, they've also been referred to as giant pillars of light by the scientific community. If we are to understand our Bible on a higher level of thinking, then we really can understand that angels, they're not just entities that can interact with mankind supernaturally or spiritually, and having a position of power and authority in God's kingdom of the universe, but we can also scientifically explain them, or an aspect of them, I'd like to say, in terms of how they interact with the environment. Okay, so, you know, we're not just describing it in the supernatural. We don't just understand it in the higher realms of the supernatural, which is what, you know, ancient religions point to about angels or these messengers of light. But we're also understanding them scientifically and how, you know, these angles of light interact with our environment and how we observe this now. So I believe that, you know, what we are discovering about the universe, about our world, and about energy is ultimately taught in the Bible, the Holy Scriptures. And oftentimes it's hidden in plain sight. So, you know, this really kind of verifies that the Bible is this mysterious and phenomenal book that can actually explain science to us when we really peel back the layers of the elementary school knowledge in the Bible and move on to the more graduate level understanding that is packed within the Holy Scriptures. And that's why the Scriptures are supernatural and magical and mystical, because they are encoded with information, layers and levels of information from top to bottom, heaven to earth, inside and out, from inside and out. And again, this points us to infinite intelligence. This is where it ultimately points us to, is the source of all of this infinite intelligence. Sprites are an interesting factor in science, especially because they chose to call them sprites in the first place. You know, when the word sprite is traditionally defined as an elf or fairy, as I shared in a previous video. Now, if we examine the word sprite, we can see again the similarity that this word has to spirit. And after, you know, I originally, seen this similarity here, I immediately put it in the search engine, and as I shared in the previous video, it was already popping up side by side, sprite and spirit. So the spirit is merely the light body, which is packed full of intelligence and power, might I add. And if we're examining what sprites are in scientific terms, then we can actually see the possibility of them being associated as angels of light, which are also the couriers of light. And in part 1 of the Angel of Light series, when we started off, I shared the words angel, archangel, and angle to get an understanding of how these words relate to each other and whether we were now beginning to understand angels in a more scientific way with the play of words here. And again, as you see, the science community is playing on these words, and these words are related to the supernatural or the spiritual. Now, in, an article that I wrote called Angels of Light, this is on the Universe of God website. You're welcome to go and read it. But also in this series, we've been examining these words. Initially, we were examining these words, archangel, angel, angle, and so forth. And we've uncovered the composites of these words. Now, we're going to take another look at these words to assist us in understanding what sprites may be a reference to when it's all said and done. Now, again, revisiting this information that was shared in videos 1 and 2, ang, A-N-G, means to bend, and the word L is a shining light. L is biblically, historically, and culturally a term that refers to angels. Arc is also meaning bending or arching, and we can quickly deduce that archangel is the same word as archangle. When we combine the words ang and L, we get the word angel. Thus, we get the meaning bending of light. Angle means to bend and is defined as the space between intersecting lines. In the Bible, God referred to angels as messengers, ministers of light. Thereby, we see another clue to the angel or the angle being a courier or a carrier of light, thus being a messenger of this light, this natural light, and this supernatural light, okay? There's a different ways to see, these messengers of light or this light. Let's consider that we know God is light, okay? Now, with these clues and this knowledge, we can conclude that angels are angles of light. They are messengers of light because they are messengers of God, and they are the reflection of light with regard to the bending of light or the arc, okay? Within the space between intersecting lines. Okay, between this space, these angles and these angels of light exist. Okay, so we see them in the space of our atmosphere, in the space of our world. We see them in the space, these intersecting angles in the space of the universe. I mean, this terminology is just really interconnected. You can't have one without the other. Male and female, okay, positive and negative, duality, like these things coexist and they work better together. Okay, when we take something from the periodic table of elements, it could be aluminum, hydrogen or whatever. Let's just water, for example. Hydrogen and oxygen, these atomic bases of hydrogen and oxygen. Separate, they create one thing. Together, they create a new thing. Ultimately, together, they create something better. Okay, so we want the male and the female. Together, they create something better. Together, they create new life, another person. Separate, they don't create much of anything, right? I mean, they create more or create even better together is basically the point. So again, for the sake of time, we're going to end part 5, video 5 of the series of Angels of Light as we examine sprites, and we're going to go into video 6. So I hope you join me in video 6 as we go further into the scientific understanding of the supernatural.